Hello, folks. I am William C. Tracy, author of the Dissolution Verse, and soon to be a new book in a new universe, which I'm going to give you a little hint of today. You can find me online at williamctracy.com. You can find my books on Amazon. I have 5 books out now. In the Dissolution Verse, which is a series of planets connected by music-based magic instead of by technology. So it's got a little bit of steampunk, as you can see from the get-up, got some music and magic and aliens and all sorts of stuff mixed together. It's a lot of fun to write, and I'll give you a little hint of some of that too today. But for now, what I'm going to do is read the first chapter of a new epic fantasy that I have coming out from 9 Star Press later this year. It's called Fruits of the Gods. And the basis of this story is that seasonal fruit that grows on trees can give magic properties if people eat them. So, here we go. Chapter 1, Under the Malice Tree. The gods made mortals as their servants, but freed them when they became troublesome to keep. When, against all odds, the mortals prospered on their own, the gods thought to bribe them with gifts to gain their worship. It was the mistress's 3rd miscarriage. Kasari knelt beside Bel, both sisters digging in the hole to accept the little bundle. The solitary malice tree above them would take the grim fertilizer for its magical harvest. She could feel the master's eyes on her back and Shuma's, the guard captain. The mistress and her litter, 2 guards, and 3 slaves holding torches filled out their party. The flickering glow guttered over the little hole. The ground resisted Kasari's chipped spade, and her breath misted as she dug. Moonlight shone on her and Bel through new leaves of the malice tree, standing alone between rows of grapevines. She brushed her long hair back, bleached somewhere between silver and white, taking only a second to eye the bundle at the mistress's feet. The noble blood the child would add to the malice's harvest did nothing to offset Arakaba Atta's frustration. The master doted on his young new wife. Bel's spade landed with a hollow thunk. Curious, Kasari dug next to her sister. Something was buried here. She could see no detail in the dark, but knew better than to alert their master. It might be valuable. Kasari saw Bel's eyes locked on the dark corner of the grave. Her spade stabbed underneath, prying the thing up. Kasari knocked her sister's arm away, then dug at the opposite end of the hole. Bel took the hint and, frowning, plunged her spade in with too much force. It bounced off a rock, throwing dirt in Kasari's face. She spit out grit tasting of iron and fertilizer. Arakaba Atta, next to his grieving wife, pointed one finger. Torchlight highlighted the parted lock of red in his white blonde hair. Shuma stepped forward at the gesture. The Freeman guard captain was a natural blonde, no streaks of magical color in his tight curls, nor was his hair bleached, as was Kasari's and Bel's. What was that sound? What did you hit? Shuma towered above them, the biggest man Kasari had ever seen, rumored to be the disowned son of a neighboring noble. It was nothing, Kasari answered, thinking furiously. It was something, blonde, he answered, unlimbering the whip at his side. Kasari's back tensed, her shirt scratching against the raised scars. She had to answer. Mortal hands had buried something here. What could she get from offering up the prize? Not as much as keeping the knowledge from the master. Bel was watching her face, spade poised. It was a wood root, Kasari finished for her. She pointed at her last mistake rather than the treasure. It would give meaning to her hesitation. See, she said. I nicked a root. It was visible as a glistening wet spot in the moonlight. The master came forward and peered into the small hole. It wouldn't harm the tree in the long run, but it was still a slave's error. Kasari kept the scream in as the whip drew a line of fire across her back. Keep digging, Arakaba Atta said. Do not injure my tree further. It is worth far more than your life, blonde. I do not need added trouble. He stepped back to his wife in her litter, his face blending into shadow. Kasari put her head down and dug, her back burning. Cold air washed down her spine through a rent in her thin shirt, stark against the hot wetness. Bel followed, digging deliberately. Kasari shifted to a more comfortable position, hoping to keep her shirt from touching the bleeding wound. She didn't wish her sister to feel the whip, but wondered if Arakaba Atta would have punished Bel the same way. Her sister's gift for pruning godfruit trees excused her from all but the worst transgressions. Almost all. Kisari glanced down to Bell's incomplete left hand, resting by the grave. They finished the hole well enough to please the master, keeping away from where the object was buried. They placed the small bundle by the guard's torchlight and filled in the dirt. Kisari took a moment to breathe. Not long enough to bring Shuma's whip down, but enough to pull a ragged shawl around her shoulders. She sucked in a breath as it brushed her wounded back. Bell could look at it later. Kisari shivered into the shawl, sweat from digging chilling her. The malice tree was past harvest, and the season was on the cusp of spring. It was the in-between time when even citrons were scarce, and everyone skimped on godfruit. Belle helped her to her feet, and Kisari and her sister placed the name rail in the fence around the tree, under the master's watchful eye. There were 5 other name rails already inscribed, 2 from the previous miscarriages, and 1 from Arakaba Ata's first wife, Tiamai. The fever had taken her 3 years ago. Stumps of long-dead malice trees stood nearby, breaking rows of leafless grapevines with their own rotting name rails. The grapes, normal fruit, were sold to market or made into wine. "Girl," Arakaba Ata directed her, "clean the birthing room before you sleep." He put an arm around his trembling wife in her litter and kissed her forehead. "Take her back," he directed the 3 slaves holding the litter. The other guard left with them, leaving a torch with Shuma. Arakaba Ata came forward, taking a slightly wrinkled malice slice from his tunic. Kisari watched, slowly cleaning the dirt from her and Bell's spades, making time. Arakaba Ata pushed 1 red lock, magic gifted from the 4 gods of the seasons, behind his ear as he popped the malice in his mouth. Kisari saw the shudder that took his body as he bit down, traces of lightning coursing down his arms, illuminating the darkness. She drank in the display. Arakaba Ata stepped close to the new-cut naming rail and lifted his right forefinger. Orange light bloomed in the night, a single pillar of flame. He drew a line of fire across the rail, charring in the name of his stillborn son, Arakaba Tir. By the time he finished marking the rail, Kisari could see his jaw moving in the last few flickers of lightning as he tried to draw the last bit of juice from the god fruit's flesh. This far up in the mountains, away from the capital city of Cartooniash, and near the ring of devastation the nobles called the Blasted Lands, her master would waste none of the magical juice. Kisari spun in her sister's cough, but not fast enough. She had forgotten to clean the spade while watching. Arakaba Ata's backhanded swipe caught her across the face, and she fell to the ground, her head bouncing. "Be on your way, girl," he huffed. Kisari put a finger to her split lip and made the mistake of raising her eyes. This time the blow laid her flat out, darkening her vision. She scrambled to her knees, slightly dizzy, but kept her gaze down. She probed a loose tooth with her tongue. What had he said? His blow had knocked the sense from her. I'll clean the birthing room now, by your leave, master." Bell's hand gripped her sleeve, supporting. Arakaba Ata's cold eyes were still on her, she knew. "You can take Tashi's place filling the latrines tomorrow before your other duties, to remind you not to get ideas above your place." She bolted, Bell close behind. The blood in her mouth and on her back were worth the secret buried under the malice tree. "It was hollow," Bell said, holding the wheelbarrow near, but not too near, as Kisari shoveled dirt into a pit of still steaming filth. Kisari had cleaned the birthing room and washed out all the bloody rags and sheets. The thought of the buried treasure kept her going, and then, since it was already close to dawn, she had started on the latrines. If she didn't finish her early, one of the other slaves would complain, and Shuma would be out with his whip. She plotted how best to finish her chores, slotting each one in the fastest order. The larger moon, Shirgal, the great light, poked its head out from its stand of nearby trees. "We have to go back," Belle said, then draped an arm across her nose and mouth. Kisari threw another shovelful of dirt. She had a cloth wrapped around her head, but the stench still came through. "Keep your voice down," she hissed, then regretted having to breathe. She gagged, but controlled her stomach. It almost made her forget about the open sore in her back and her loose tooth. When she could speak again, she said, "We'll get back there, but not now. What do you think they would do if they found us near the malice tree with no guards?" She flipped dirt into the hole, watching the yawning man eye them from the porch of the house. Slaves were almost never unobserved. The smell was getting fainter the more dirt she piled on the mess. The grass would be very green here. "What if someone else finds it? There could be a slave's freedom in that box." Kasari rolled her eyes at her sister's words. If Belle would only take a moment to plan, she would see how unlikely it was anyone would go back to the grave. But Belle got away with more than Kasari ever could. Her sister's cheeks were pleasantly round compared to Kasari's thin face, her waist smaller, her complexion darker. Kasari was too pale and burned in the height of the summer. It had freckled her skin. No wonder everyone thought Belle was the younger of them, though she was a good 5 years older. The guard was nearly asleep, but it still paid to be careful. Even other slaves could not be trusted. No purpose wondering what it might be until we get there, Kasari told her. Soon we'll go back to the grape arbor under night's cover and see what's buried under the tree. You've waited 23 years for something like this. You can wait a little longer. You can imagine, Belle mused, absently stroking her long hair. Like all slaves, their hair was bleached once a week, whether or not they were naturally blonde. Even if a slave had only a few strands of magical color, it was death deed Godford. Imagine what? Treasure? As like to find a wagon waiting to carry you off to Carduniash, Kasari snorted. You wish for that. I'll take a day without work for each one to come true. Go get me another barrow of dirt. We've still got to repair the tool shed, mend the shears, and till the fields today. Belle turned the barrow, then stopped. Promise me we will dig that box up, she said. Kasari watched her sister. She was as serious as Kasari had seen her face almost pained. You think it could really help us? Belle gestured to Kasari's split lip. Anything is better than this. So that is the first chapter of a book that is coming out mid-year in epic fantasy. Excuse me. And to give you a hint of something else, I'm going to read a little bit from my Dissolution Verse series. So I guess since you are the attending member, would you like something from a big epic space opera, action adventure, a political intrigue, murder mystery, or a adventure climbing a wall?
Murder mystery.
Murder mystery, all right. That one gets a lot of people. So this is, pull up the book. This is my fourth published book. You can read these in any order. And this one is a prequel to the other ones. It's set about 30 to 50 years in the past of the other stories. And this deals with a young man who can hear two aspects of the grand symphony. That is what the magicians in my series use. So
another music /
yes.
magic thing.
Yes, it is. Yes, this is music based as well. So there's a grand symphony that underlies the universe, which the magic practitioners can hear. They can take notes from their experience that builds up in them and change the symphony, which then makes physical reality alter. So I'll read the first little bit of this. And this is called The Society of Two Houses, which I thought was a very Sherlockian name. Part 1. The Body. Magi in the great assembly of species are rare, born at a rate of 1 per 5 million individuals. Most hear only one of the 6 aspects of the grand symphony, but 1 in every 60 magi, or 1 in 300 million individuals, can hear 2 of the symphony's aspects. It is one's belief these few, the ones gathered here, have the ability to drive innovation in the great assembly, bolstered by a sensitivity to the underlying rhythms of the universe. For this group's final entrance into the society, please step forward for the gaze to be applied. Private address by Mortlin, Binish head of the House of Healing, on the induction of new members into the Society of Two Houses. I stared down at the body of Speaker Therapo, willing my frozen feet to bring me further into this study. I was supposed to be presenting the prototype model I held, not discovering his corpse. I clenched my hand involuntarily, then yelped and released my fingers as the scale model of the system beast dug tiny, sharp hands into my palm. The delicate construct, made in the form of Festour, like my colleague Gaunt, had taken days to build. The pain unlocked to my feet, and I hurried forward to set the model on a side table, just a little too tall for me, like everything in the speaker's study. Though my first instinct was to go to the Imperium Guard, I instead closed the study door. I had a few minutes during which the deceased speaker and I were supposed to meet, before his secretary announced the next appointment. My mind flew through what questions the guard would ask if I alerted them. "Magus Mandamon Feldo, is it? Why were you here to see the speaker? Why does a magus need approval from the assembly? Shouldn't this be going through the Council of the Magi?" Even thinking of telling the authorities about the Society of Two Houses made the jiggly earworm of the Gaias threaten to derail my thoughts. The guard would quickly become suspicious when I further choked and fainted instead of telling where my prototype system beast came from or under whose patronage I worked. I shook my head, dislodging the music that kept the Society safe. Because of our unconventional methods, Society Magi went through a roundabout process of getting approval from the Great Assembly to introduce our new and disruptive inventions. Per our usual methods, the head of the Society had convinced the late speaker not to ask questions about where my colleagues and I got our resources. Even I didn't know how the Society provided so many high-quality metals and the logical gearing ratios. Once available, our system beasts would be the perfect servants and secretaries. They could haul loads, act as butlers, deliver mail, remind owners of engagements, and much more. However, without a sponsor, Gaunt, Kratatha, and I would never be able to supply them to the inhabitants of the Nether. If this murder even hinted at our organization's existence, it would also compromise and taint our research by association. I'd be left with nothing, and the Society could no longer develop innovation without those in power asking severe questions. My heart sped just thinking about it. Now, the speaker who would have sponsored us was dead. I let myself really look at him, sprawled out on the floor. He was an Itanala, half again as tall as me, hence the furniture. What had happened to him? One hand rose to my mouth, then down to the small beard I was growing out, pulling at the hair in thought. Something in my head was silently screaming, though I had been near violent death before. Stay calm. I had to concentrate, use the few minutes available to figure out what had happened. Then I would at least have a way to defend myself against questioning authorities. Otherwise, they would detain me as a suspect no matter what I said. Any questions would lead to the Society. There was a pool of blood, slowly seeping into the carpet, and still dripping from the deep cuts which nearly severed the speaker's neck. His head was at an unnatural angle, wide, glassy eyes staring out from his faintly blue face. Though his mouth was open in shock, the blue coloration was natural to the Itanala, not a symptom of asphyxiation. He wouldn't have had time to suffocate before the blood loss to his brain killed him. I tried to push away the nausea threatening to bring my breakfast back. Adding to the mess would only complicate solving Speaker Tharapo's death. The speaker and I had corresponded through the Imperium's mail service just the day before, and he'd invited me to show him the model my colleagues and I had created. Introducing innovations developed by the select group of magi I belonged to had to be handled delicately, a dance of avoiding names, places, and methods of experimentation. Was the speaker killed to stop me from showing him this little system beast? Did someone find out about the Society and its methods? No, that was paranoia bordering on my mentor's level. No one outside of my unique society even knew what the system beasts were. Was this self-inflicted? I couldn't see how. There was no implement here with which the speaker could have cut his own throat. Not like that. The speaker's secretary would check on us soon, maybe even open the closed door without knocking. I had perhaps 10 minutes, the time in which I would have presented my proposal, before someone else called for the speaker's attention. The defining quality of Magi belonging to the Symphony of Two Houses was that each of us could hear 2 of the 6 aspects of the Grand Symphony, rather than just one, like most Magi. Each combination of aspects had its own label. My title in the symphony was Investigator. Until now, I thought the titles merely convenient masks for those members not wanting to be identified by name. Now it seemed more ironic. So I would investigate, and if I could clear any trace of the Society from Speaker Tharapo's death, then I would go to authorities. If not, well, I'd deal with that when I got to it. Wood paneling made the office comfortable, and a dominating festour-made rug covered the tiled floor. There was one desk, clean save for a writing mat, with a chair on either side. Beside me was the side table where my prototype sat. Both side walls held rows of bookshelves, dusty and obviously little used. The speaker's body took up most of the floor, splayed across the center of the rug. I looked at the chronograph, an older invention of the Society, chained to my vest, marking time until I estimated I would be discovered with the corpse. I knelt by Speaker Tharapu's body, careful to avoid putting the knees of my tailored suit in the pool of greenish blood seeping into the rug. I could feel the heat from the blood and from the body, though the sticky liquid was already coagulating. He had not been dead long, whatever happened. I swallowed bile and leaned in. Aside from the deep gash in the Tanala's throat, certainly fatal, there was no other sign of a fight. I looked from the body to the closed door of the study, gauging where the speaker would have been standing. Falling back on the rug like this meant he was facing the door, along with his killer? It was pure luck the body hadn't hit the chair pulled out on this side of the Chorinwood desk. I held one hand out, measuring. Speaker Tharapo's frizzy mane of auburn hair was less than the width of my hand away from one leg of the desk. I pushed my glasses up my nose and tried to forget how Tharapo would have been the sponsor for our new company selling system beasts, and a facade to remove interest in where and how my colleagues and I had developed the idea. Many of the experiments occurring behind the walls of the mansion where I lived would not sit well in the public eye, yet the Society was a generator of progress. It also had connections, under false identities of course, to many of the speakers for the Great Assembly, using its members' reach to exploit potentially embarrassing knowledge. I didn't know what Speaker Tharapu had done, but I hoped his indiscretion had nothing to do with his death. The Society's direct involvement would complicate things greatly. From information gathered over the short time I had been a member, I knew the Society's efforts had saved people's lives and ended wars quickly and efficiently. Its members had added comforts to our lives, like freezing and heating technology, and remedies for bacterial infections. If, in the process, a few unknown persons suffered or a few highly prized resources went missing, what was that against the good of all? Yet I was sure the Great Assembly or the Council of the Magi would not see it the same way. Time was wasting, and I reined in my thoughts, looking up to the desk. Someone must have been sitting on this side, speaking with the Atanala before pushing away. The speaker had come from behind his desk before he was killed. I clenched my jaw. What prompted his death, and why did it have to happen this morning of all mornings? A non-magus might have had difficulty discovering more in the brief time before they were found, but as an investigator, I had two advantages: the symphonies I could hear. I let the symphony of healing fill my mind with faint rising and falling scales. It told me Speaker Tharapu was definitely dead, his complex trills and glissandos degenerating into steady and uninteresting eighth notes. Conversely, the symphony of potential dealt in transferring energy, and as I listened to the fundamental music underlying the universe, I heard residues of people's actions, reactions, and movements. Each one was a traceable resonance, though some were extremely faint. As I got to my feet and went to the desk, the musical themes of energy became clearer. Speaker Tharapu had come around the desk, a glissando and dipping trill in the music, following another body, who was speaking with him. I crossed the rug on the other side of the speaker's body, stepping over his large boots, pointed out at angles. I looked away from the ghastly wound. Sifting through the symphony of potential, I found another fading theme. Tharapu had been standing just here, and I listened carefully, trying to separate out one rhythm, like listening to a single string playing in an orchestra. I thought his assailant had stood in the doorway, ready to leave, but it was hard to say. Closing the door had partially written over that music. I checked my chronograph again. I'd found nothing yet, but there was still time. Did this other person murder the speaker? They must have. Could it be connected to showing the System Beast prototype model? The Gia is protecting the Society, and some would say it's unethical practices. It was supposed to be foolproof. I didn't want this extra complication. Just creating the System Beasts had been challenge enough. Need more information. My eyes, almost of their own accord, were drawn back to the body, my subconscious registering something I'd missed. I wiped sweaty hands on my vest and stepped closer, pulling the hem of my pants away from the ruined section of rug and Tharapu's throat. The fingers and thumb of the speaker's right hand were together, as if he had held something. Going by the corpse's open mouth and wide eyes, he had been surprised when he died. The House of Potential revealed a fading jangle of discordant notes, tight muscles in the speaker's hand, now loosened in death. The House of Healing repeated an intertwined duet. He'd been holding something made from organic material, like cloth or paper. I knelt down by his right hand. Another trait of an investigator was to hear the past energy and biology of an object, like seeing a short way into the past. I listened to the patterns of harmonics between the two symphonies. The music of healing was regular, overlapping chords weaving into a rigidly defined structure. The music of potential had held the fading change in beat that meant the object had been cut or torn from another source. It was probably a piece of paper taken from a larger source of information, maybe something the speaker had written. Finally, another clue. I let the symphony of potential take the upper hand, retracing the descending melody. It led toward the closed door, so whoever had killed the speaker had taken what he held into the hallway and beyond. I checked the timepiece on my vest again. About half my interview time was gone. I opened the door, peering both ways. The short corridor was empty for the moment, and I surged outside, closing the door silently behind me. The intersection of healing and potential rose out here, the notes more recent. Whoever had taken the paper went this way. I turned left, following the melody. The hallway was in the lower level of the dome of the assembly, where each of the 66 speakers had their own rooms and, unfortunately, their own secretary. I'd only gone a few steps when a face under a bob of golden hair stuck around the next corner. The Atanala who had let me in must have heard my steps. She was wearing the kind of makeup many female working Atanala adopted, with tiny red dots above and below her eyes, her lips tinted deep purple against the faint blue of her face. She came fully around the corner, putting away a tube of lipstick, and I stopped dead, my mind whirling. Something about her movement looked suddenly familiar, as if I knew her from somewhere, but I couldn't place it. "Anything I can help you with?" she said. "Are you finished with your interview? I'll just pop in and see what the speaker..." Her hands clasped together in front of her, each massaging the other. She must have seen something. She couldn't have killed him. I interrupted her flow of words. No, we're not done yet. What if... You haven't seen anyone come past, have you? Perhaps with a piece of paper?" The secretary considered me, looking down from shoulders and head above me. Her eyes were watery and still puffy from sleep. They would have been comically large on one of my species, but in her faintly blue, freckled face, they only looked earnest. "I haven't, but I got here just before you. You're the speaker's first appointment." She shrugged. "He works odd hours, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes late at night. So whoever had killed him had left with the list just in time. I still needed to clear the society from this mess and somehow keep the Imperium Guard from arresting me once the secretary figured out I'd been having an interview with a deceased speaker. Perhaps a little misdirection. The speaker asked if he had another 5 minutes in his schedule. I shrugged. He seems to have lost some information necessary to my presentation. I tried to keep my face neutral. Just a moment, I'll check." She sniffed, then ducked back around the corner, presumably to her desk. I let out a slow breath, trying to keep my hands from shaking. In the few moments available, I heard the fading traces of the paper's thief. Whatever happened had been very recent, or I wouldn't have been able to still hear the notes. It went right by her desk, and unless I wanted to run past and alert everyone to the body, the musical trail would fade away before I could follow it. The way the music was dropping notes into inaudibility, it wouldn't be long until it was impossible to track. The secretary popped around the corner again, her hands tracing elegant paths through the air. He can spare another 5 minutes. I'll come to tell you when the time is up." She looks tired. Must have been late coming in this morning. That will only make her feel worse when she finds the body. "That will do nicely. I'll let him know," I said as I backed away, then threw a glance down at the chronograph. A few more minutes to search. Once I left, the speaker's cooling body would not stay secret long. My only chance was to find a clue inside the room. I paused at the door to make sure the secretary wasn't watching, then closed my eyes, separating out the bubbly, anxious music that defined her person from the rest of the symphony of healing. Taking notes from my being, mimicking her chords and melodies, I tied them to a note keyed to the House of Potential. An aura of white and brown grew around me, visible only to Magi, the physical results of changing the symphony. I pressed my fingers on the door frame, and the aura transferred to that spot. The new construct, a system, would send me an alerting tone if the secretary came down the corridor. Losing a few of my notes was worth the extra warning. Inside the study, I closed the door, frowned at Speaker Tharapu's body, and scanned the room. The desk was the only other place to look, and the fading music pointed in that direction, though it was nearly inaudible. The speaker brought the paper from his desk. Why? To give it to the killer? I positioned myself where Speaker Tharapu would have sat, though my legs dangled as if I were a toddler, and spread one hand across the writing mat on the desk. It was leather, dyed green with filigree around the edges. The Symphony of Healing held a last leitmotif woven through the writing mat, swirls of notes corresponding to the swirls of writing. The source of the paper's trail was here, maybe copied from another place. I only had a few more moments before it faded completely. I closed my eyes, tracing the most recent indentations in the map with a finger as I followed the music along a measure. I could almost make out what was written. It was a list of some sort, with names and titles? Translating notes of the symphony into writing was not something I had done before, and I hoped the tactile input from my finger would help me decipher the script. My eyes flew open, and the symphony left me in a crash of noise. I was tracing my own name. My finger continued its path, unaided now by the music in the back of my head. It would have been even harder to catch hold of that particular sequence of notes before it disappeared. The symphony did not like Magi fiddling with it overly much. Mandamun Fildo, investigator. Why would this contain the name of the society used for my combination of houses? Only a member should know of them. I traced the next line, now more familiar with the indentations. Tethan, overwhelm. The name was vaguely familiar, another member who worked in chemistry, I believe, and I felt farther down. Demumpinon Gaunt, watcher. Archaeologist. It was the name of my friend and colleague, working on the System Beeps project. The little prototype was modeled after her. That meant the next line was probably Kratatha, engineer. Yes, Kratatha, our project team's third member. It was conceivable the speaker had all our names, likely even as I had been scheduled to speak with him. But why and how were our society titles included? What had this Tethan to do with it? The list went on. Plithin Atif, psychiatrist. I knew him socially, a boorish Loboth. There is one more indentation I can make out below Plithin's name. Mortlin, biologist. No, this was no list of appointments. This was a list of the members of the Society of Two Houses, with our internal titles, which no one outside the group should have. My heart sped at the implication. The speaker is not a magus, thus not a member of the society. How did he get this? Someone else knows, but what do they know?
Very good for a chapter.
Thank you.
So you said the title of the book was Sherlockian. Is that your inspiration for murder mysteries, or do you?
Yes, I actually went through all three of the big Sherlock Holmes collections right before I wrote this, and I had been writing this character much later in life, and the image came to me of him standing over a dead body, and the fact that he has two houses and the Society of Two Houses, which sounds very sort of Victorian Sherlock hidden mystery. So with the title and that first image, I knew I had to write this book, and that's where it came from, really. So if you like these, check out my stuff, WilliamCTracy.com.